Hello everyone, today's poem is 冰封, 东山, a Bin wind from the Book of Songs. This poem is quite a popular and touching poem. It might be the very first poem of the poetry genre, 思乡怀人, the poetry genre of thinking of hometown, thinking of family type. So this is a very, very big portion in the classic Chinese poetry. And especially the very, very first poetry has set up the very typical situation and environment of this type. Very likely a soldier in the far, far away frontier area somewhere, and he's thinking about his home, thinking about his family, his wife. And in the later generations, somehow there's a lot of variations, and some is to pretend a wife to thinking about his husband in the frontier battlefield. And this finally was categorized as 闺怨诗, the woman complaining poem. So basically, it's about the thinking between people, between family members. There are a lot of poems in Book of Songs that is somewhat hard to be understood by people today, because the feelings, the situations has changed a lot. For example, to pray for their ancestors, to pay their deep condolence to their ancestors. Today, we still have that sort of feelings, but not in such a depth and in such profound feelings compared to the ancient Chinese. And but the thinking of each other, between brothers, between sisters, between parents and sons, between the husband and wife, this still is something with everybody's life. So it's so easy, still so easy for us to understand the beauty, especially the sadness when the two people were separated, and the hardness, the sadness when they are thinking of each other. So let's see how this very first poem looks like, and how the writing techniques in this very first poem, and how the impact, the influence, or the how much feelings it aroused could be aroused to a modern people. This poem was reflected in so many outstanding classic poems in the later generations, and even in the Book of Songs. Another poem, Xiaoyao Caiwei, actually is a follower to this poem. They write about this almost same situation, and they express almost the same feelings. But anyhow, the poem Xiaoyao Caiwei shows its more sophisticated writings, and one of the words was so praised by the later peoples, which someone claimed that sentence is the best and the most touching sentence in the Book of Songs, which is 昔我往矣，杨柳依依，今我来思，雨雪霏霏. So this was so praised by a lot of people that it was the most touching and beautiful sentence among the poems in the Book of Songs. And another poem in the Han Dynasty, something roughly 1,000 years. 1,000 years up this point was a very, very direct descendant of this poem. 十五从军征. You can search my video. 十五从军征, a poem written some 1,000 years of this poem. Still a very touching poem, very touching and very sad poem. Generally, this poem was considered that it's about the conquering to the east by Duke of Zhou in Chinese, 周公东征. And though this is a huge rebellion, a turmoil in the East China at the very beginning of the Zhou dynasty, and the Duke of Zhou take the lead and defeat all the rebellion troops. And by this conquering to the east, the Zhou dynasty was finally founded firmly and make it a great and prosperous dynasty. So this war, or this war against the rebellion troops, is a very, very key event in the Zhou dynasty. So that's why this poem was related to that war to the east. And there's a lot of the term in this poem about east, the east mount. I came from the east. So a lot of the term about east. And there's another key term, 3 years of war. So I think by this poem, it was believed in the later generations, even today, the war lasts for 3 years. Actually, it's so hard for us to know how long it takes. And in this video, I developed a totally different explanation to this poem. This war actually is a war to the west, and very likely this poem is a much, much rather ancient poem, which was written before the Zhou dynasty was founded. And in that time, the Zhou people lived in the place of the county Bin, or the state of Bin. So the place of Bin basically is within very narrow valleys between mountains, and in this place the mountains goes from the north to the south, so the valleys goes from the north to the south. So the most familiar scenario for the people, for the Zhou people, is the east mount, or east mountain, or the west mountain. They live in the valley, right? So there, and also from the sentences and from the wordings of this poem, it clearly tells us this war happened somewhere in the west from their home. So that's the general conclusion. Let's get to the first paragraph. 我徂东山，滔滔不归. I'm going toward the east mountain, and it was such a long time away. I'm away from my home. The term east mountain here is the very, very key words for us to analyze the meaning, the content of this poem. And when I searching the classic literacy before the Qin dynasty, basically before the Qin dynasty is the Zhou dynasty, right? Very, very few literacies has the term East Mountain, and there's one time appeared in 春秋左传, a very famous history book, 春秋左传, a lot of interesting stories. So when it mentioned the East Mountain, it's just referred to the mountain east to their home. And the story is about the Jin state. So, and thus this East Mountain refers to a mountain just east to the Jin state. And today, nobody would ever call that mountain East Mountain. It's sort of the unknown mountain for today's people. And so from here, and from this very popular and generic term, East Mountain, very likely this East Mountain refers to the mountain in their home, in the Bin state. So look at the map, the Bin state, the map of the Bin state. There is a river going from north to south in the valley, in the fertile valley, which where the Zhou people lived. And in the east, there's a long mountain from the north to the south. And there's in the west of the valley, there's also a mountain from the north to the south. So that's the East Mountain, and that's the West Mountain for Zhou people. So the first sentence tells us very clearly, it's they are coming back home. They are on their way to their home. And the East Mountain is their home. And let's continue. 我来自东，零雨其濛. I'm coming from the east, and it's raining endlessly. So let's try to build up the direction for now. Bin State is their home, the East Mountain, right? And he's on his way back to his home, to the Bin State. And he said, I'm coming from the east. So where was this poet? Where was this guy at the moment? He's somewhere west to the Bin State, right? That's why he said, I'm a person from the east. So this concurrent, this war, is a war to the west. It's not a war to the east. It could. So that's my conclusion. This poem is a poem much ancient, maybe the most ancient poem in the Book of Songs, because even there's a very few history record for that period of time before they found the Zhou dynasty. We still have some records that the Zhou people has a lot of war to the west, to the north, and this poem is about one of the war to the west. The next sentence, 我东曰归，我心西悲. I'm going to the east directions. That's the way to my home. And I was so sad when I was at west side. Why he was so sad? That's the war, right? He led a very hard life. A lot of his brothers, his father, his sons maybe died during the war. That's the war. That's the real things about a war. That's why he was so sad. Okay, the next sentence. 制彼裳衣，勿士行枚. When I'm thinking about the day when I'm about to start my journey, journey to the west side to this war, my wife sewing all the clothes for me. 制彼裳衣. So my wife sewing all the clothes for me. And as a warrior, I went far, far away to the west. 行枚 is a loan word of 行迈. So even today, in the place of the Shanxi province, Mei and Mai reads at the same sound. Mei. So that's the sound. Mei. The next sentence. 蜈蜈者蠋，蜎在桑野. The worm that goes curved zigzag way is the silkworm, and we are steamed in the wild place of the mulberry forest. So it's describing something very, very unfamiliar to us, but here actually is telling us the timing and the season. So whenever you saw something about the insects, animal, birds, or some plants, in 90% in the book of Psalms, it's telling you the season, because the season is a very, very key factor for the Zhou people. In the spring, they went to the farming field. In the summer, the most busy season in a year, and in the autumn, it's a harvest and a big feast, and in the winter's time, it's the time to build the house, to start a war to the foreign countries, or just have a rest in the home. So they're doing the big things according to the 4 seasons. So here it tells us that it's the springtime they started this war. So this war is not well planned, and very likely this war is a response to an invasion by their enemies from the west. So that's the things about season. This war is not well planned, or it's not in the plan of the Zhou people. So it's a response, it's a reaction to an invasion, actually. Okay, the last sentence in the first paragraph. 敦彼独宿，亦在车下. So 敦, in a normal sense, it means do something very diligently. And here, it tells us he's doing others so diligently. What does he do to others? And who is the other guy? Bi means the other people. His wife, right? So, 敦彼 means he's thinking about his wife so hard, because he is away from his home already. He was maybe in the battlefield, or maybe in the midway to the battlefield. They are living in the hot summer under the mulberry forest, 烨在桑野. And at the night time, they have a camp, they sleep. So he sleep alone, lonely, 独宿, he sleep lonely, and he sing about his wife so hard. 亦在车下, so sometimes he sleeps under his chariot. Why? Because it's raining sometimes in the summer, right? So it tells the hardness of a war, of a journey. Now we have finished the first paragraph. The key messages from the first paragraph is the poet tells us very clearly he was on his way to his home from a war. and there's such a long time he was away from his home. And his home was in the east directions, and it's raining endlessly. So what does the small rain endlessly? It's the autumn's time. So if you have ever had any experience lived in this area for years, you will know that the spring, summer, autumn, and winter, the weather is so different, and it all has its characteristics. The autumn it rains endlessly. The small rain endlessly. So remember the time when the poet was writing this poem is autumn. He's on his way back to his home. It's a very, very muddy, very tough road to come back to his home. If you have ever been to this area, not only because of the rain, because of the road, the earth is full of the tiny dust of the yellow soil. When it rains, a lot of rains will make the road so muddy and so hard to travel. So that's also enhanced the sadness, the negative feelings of the poet. And in the second half of the first paragraph, the poet recalled the day, the time he left his home. His wife prepared a lot of things for him, for his journey, the clothes, all kinds of things, of course. And when they started, it's in the springtime. It's the time of doing the silkworm things. And later on, the summer comes. They go through the long way in the hot summer weather, and they are thinking each other so hard from the very beginning. Okay, with the first paragraph, the following three paragraphs quite easy for us. Okay, the second paragraph. 我徂东山，滔滔不归. I'm going to the east mountain to my home. I have been away from home for such a long time. 我来自东，零雨其濛. I came from the east. My home was on the east, and the small rains rains endlessly. It's the autumn's time. So he's repeating the hardness, the negative emotions in the beginning of every paragraph. So it's a really, really hard journey, and it's really, really hard and sad feelings when the poet was writing this poem. Okay, the third pair of sentences. 果臝之实，亦施于宇，伊威在室，烆在户. So it mentioned three insects here, and basically it's describing his journey and also tell us the time. It's the autumn's time. It's a time of harvest. And the 果臝之实, the 果臝lay its egg indoor. So that's the phenomenon in the autumn's time. 伊威 is indoor as well, and the Xiaoyao is indoor as well. So it tells us it's the very, very familiar situation for the Zhou people. In the autumn's time, a lot of insects goes indoor to hide the cold winter indoor. And the Yiwei is a very, very familiar insect. Today, still, we call it 西瓜虫. When I was a kid, we call it 西瓜虫, or someone will call it 潮虫. So when you roll over a stone in the summer time outdoors, you will very easily find several these insects. It lives in the dark and humid earth. And in the autumn time, they went indoor because it's getting colder and colder. Okay, let's continue. 町畽鹿场，亦要宵行. So the very muddy field of deers will march in the night with the candles, with the torches. So here it tells us it's autumn time. All the insects, they went back home, but just these people, they are still on their midway to their home. So that's why they march in the night with torch. They are so eager to catch the time to get back to their home. The last sentence, 不可畏也，亦可怀也. So we are not afraid of anything. It's only because we think about so hard. We are thinking so hard. So wei, it might mean something. Let's say in the autumn's time, there's something normally is horrible to the Zhou people, or they travel in the night is a very horrible thing. So I don't know, just wild guess. So the last sentence means they are confronting some horrible things, and they are marching, they are going day and night toward their home. And that's because they think about their home so hard. 亦可怀疑. So that's the first two pair of sentences. Sorry, that's the first two paragraphs. Now the third paragraph. 我徂东山滔滔不归，我来自东，零雨其濛. So it's such a hard journey, and they are thinking their home, their family, so hard on this journey. 冠名于志，复叹于世. The big swine was sitting on the small hill, and my wife was signing indoor in the family temple. Why? Let's continue. 洒扫穷志，我峥嵬志. So we swept, we cleaned up the house of, which was like a dome, a round dome. So that also indicates this poem could be a very, very ancient, because when they built up the Zhou dynasty, the building was quite like the Chinese building we can see today. It's in square, and it has a roof like the wings of bird. And here it tells us the roof is like a dome. So that's a very, very ancient building before they found the Zhou dynasty. And also the term 士, be careful, it always refers to the ancestors' temples. And with such implication, the big swan, 冠名于志, also indicates the tomb, because 志 refers to a small hill. It's very likely implies the tomb of their ancestors. So this poem, this pair of sentences comes in parallel. The tomb is so wild. The birds was always sitting there because nobody has the time to look after the their ancestors' tombs, right? It became wild. And the wife, the women, was signing in the ancestor temple. That's the two places for them to pray, to sacrifice to the ancestor, right? The tomb became very wild. Nobody take care of. And also the ancestor temple is getting wild, much wild as well, because only the children and the females, they still at home. All the strong men, the fathers and the sons, they went to the battlefield. And so the women, they clean up the ancestor temples. And on the other hand, 我徂栎之, I'm on a wall, I'm in the frontier areas somewhere. So in the general explanation, 栎之 was even not explained as well. But here I think it refers to the place name. And the yu very likely refers to the xianyun, the character yun. So the xianyun is a very, very lasting tribe on the west frontiers to Zhou people, to the Han people, to the Qin people. So this is a comparison about the wartime. On the back home, only the children and the female was left, and the household, the farming field, even their ancestors was not taken care of. No, because all the men was in the frontier areas. Okay, let's continue. 有敦刮苦，征在立心. So this tells the summer, something happened in the summer because of the gua, the mallow was food in the summertime. And very likely this refers to the ground ceremony, ground sacrifice in the midsummer. And 征在立心, so 有敦刮苦, it both refers to the ground ceremony in the midsummer. And in that time, the ground ceremony to the ancestors, the mallow tastes so bitterly. And when they offer their sacrifice, 蒸, the real meaning means to steam something. But in the time of the Shi Jing's time, it always referring to the sacrifice, because the way of making sacrifice is to steam, to burn the meat, to burn the food, let the smell to flow up, go up to the heaven. In such a way, the Zhou people believe that their ancestors in the heaven could smell the nice smell of the food they are burning, they are steaming. So that's the why this character Zheng was always taken as sacrifice. And the Li Xin is also a double referring. Li Xin means the firewood from the Li tree. Li is a tree actually, but it also implies a very, very sad and hard mood, like the character Li. Okay, that's the third paragraph. Basically, it's a recall to a summertime, to one of the summertime, when the most grand ceremony in the midsummer was about to hold. The female, their wife, they do the grand ceremony in their home bitterly. at the same time, all the fathers, the sons, was still at the battlefield in the west, and they feel so hard as well. And how long does it take? Let's see the last sentence. 自我不见于今3年. So 3 or 2 summer times, they taste it bitterly, and they feel so sad. The last sentence means, since we don't see each other, the poet and his wife, since we don't see each other, until this year, it lasts for 3 years. It has passed for 3 years already. It's such a long time of war. Okay, the last paragraph. 我徂东山，滔滔不归。我来自东，零雨其濛。I'm going back to my home. It's raining so endlessly, makes the road so hard. 苍耕于飞，亦要其羽。The bird of Oriole was flying. When I thinking about the time when the Oriole bird was flying, its wings shining brightly. So what's the time of this bird flying? It's the springtime. So this corresponds to the first paragraph of the Silk War. So that's the things happened in the same season, in the same months in the Zhou dynasty. 之子于归，黄渤驱马. So 之子于归 refers to the new wife. So be careful with the character 归. The general explanation, I think, why they explain so differently from me, not only because the thing I mentioned, but also because they mistakenly interpreted the term 归. This character is a very, very key character in the classic poetry, because that basically means the destination. Whenever you saw this character, it means the destination. So the destination for a human could be only 2 places. Home, when you're still alive. The tomb, when you died. So whenever you saw this term, it only refers to 2 things. Your home or your tomb. Because the tomb is the home of a dead people. So basically it's about home. So 之子于归, why it was so explained as the bride. So whenever you saw this term, it always telling you it's about a bride. Because as a girl, before you're married, you are not at your home. That's not your home. Your real home is the home you're married to. So that's with this so controversy sentences, phrases, it makes the phrase 之子于归. 之子 means the son go out, go away from home. That's the meaning of 之子 means. And 于归 means he was finally returning home. A son going away from his home, and finally he returned to his home. Who could be this guy? Only the bride. Because for a son, when he was alive, he was always belong to the same families. So that's the social structure and the social rules in the Zhou dynasty. And that's also why this phrase 之子于归 comes from. So in this poem, it just refers to his wife, and it has such a strong implication that his wife is a new wife just married to him not for long. Maybe just after his marriage, he started his journey to the West. That's why he used this term 之子于归, because 之子于归 was always associated with a new bride, with a marriage. And so let's continue. 之子于归，黄渤骑马. So my new wife, he also prepared all the utilities, all the things of my horse. So one more thing here. In the first paragraph, he mentioned his wife prepared the clothes for him. And in the last paragraph, he mentioned his wife prepared the horse for him. It tells us very clearly, this poet is a very, very senior noble person, because the clothing and the horses, the chariot, indicates he's a noble. And he was so proud of his clothing and his chariot. He mentioned in the first paragraph and the last paragraph, which tell us he might be the prince. Not prince. At that time, the Zhou state is not a kingdom, right? Just a state. So he might be the prince of the state lord, or a very, very senior noble person. So his wife prepared all the clothing, the horses for him, and 清洁其礼，九十其衣. His wife do all those work by herself, and they do so many rituals to send away his husband, to send away this army. 清洁其礼, li is a component in the clothes or maybe on the chariot, but here it's more focused on the implications. Li means set apart, so that it means to separate. And 清洁其礼 has a very, very strong implication that his wife do it by herself to ramp up the separations, to tie up the separations. So in the real situation, the couple, they will separate it for quite a long time, right? And the wife use something to tie up the separate, to bond, to let the two couples to tie up, right? 九十其衣, yi means rituals. So there's a lot of things, the ceremonies, dinings, drinkings, before they start their journey, before they start their march. And 九十 means they do it nice, they do it tense, which means they do so many rituals, they do the utmost quantities of rituals to send out their armies, which means they are so valued, they are so look on to the troops, to this march, to this conquering to the east, to the west. Okay, the most famous sentence is the last sentence. 其新孔嘉，其旧如之何? So in the last paragraph, the poet records his wife so vividly, how his wife prepared for his journey, and how his wife sent him away to this journey. And now, when the poet was on his way back to his home, on the back of the horse or on the chariot, he thought about, when my wife, when we just married, she looks so big, so beautiful. 孔家. 孔 means very, very big. 家 means to add values. And finally means fortunate. So when we were just married, my wife was a new bride. He was so big, he was so beautiful, and he was so fortunate for me. And after 3 years, we not live together. We don't see each other for 3 years. She became my old wife already. And how could it be? A very, very touching and sad sentence. Okay, that's the whole poem. 3 years of separation. 3 years in the battlefield. Some husbands died, some sons died, and this poet is still so lucky. He has the fortune to come back. He has the luckiness to see his new bride again after 3 years of separation. And let me give you another much sadness situation in the Han Dynasty. 十五从军征. So the first sentence is 十五从军征, 80使得归. So I was enrolled in the army when I was 15. Until I was 80, I had the chance to come back to my home. And there's another sentence in this poem. 更犯一时熟，不知贻阿谁. So this described when he's finally come back to his home. There was nobody in his home. His wife, his sons, his brothers, whoever, for what reason, they all died. And he was the only one left. Of course, eating is the most important thing for Chinese. So when he was coming back to his home, the first thing first, he cooked a meal for this family. And as usual, he wanted to share the food with all his family members. When he raised his head, the teardrops come down. There is nobody who can share his food. He was the only one. And after him, this family will finally end up with nothing. So this is the worst things for ancient Chinese. 绝子,绝孙, 绝户. A family, a big house ended up with nothing. And the war was always the most evil things for Chinese, because so many families end up with nothing. Nobody, nothing left because of the war. Okay, that's for today. And bye-bye.